focused on art making and in many forms: painting, textiles, weaving, ceramics, jewelry, rubber stamp designs. As far as I know, there's nothing left of her creations. But I know she was creating early on because in our visits to Pittsfield, she would always point out the local paint store where she bought her supplies. She also sported many of her own dress designs and early photos, primarily using Marimekko print designs. By 1990, Naomi graduated from the UMass Amherst with a BA in art and business. Probably the most influential aspect of her education there was her connection to New Africa House. Her primary interest seems to have been service design. And judging from her stories and her research papers that I found among her effects, that Josephus Femi Richards, an artist formerly from Senegal, took Naomi under his wing, helping her and with her surface design concepts, and even gave her the opportunity of what amounted to a teaching assistantship at a BA level, of course, by having her teach a semester-long survey in service design. A couple of years after graduating, come on. A couple of years after graduating, Naomi went to Seattle, Washington to work with Cerulean Blue, a company that produced environmentally friendly fabric dyes. In her personal art, she began mixing media with her artist books. It is obvious in these books that she had a serious talent for drawing and painting and composition, and she really enjoyed writing and visualizing her stories. She moved to Cape Cod in 1998. Her parents retired there. She has a brother living there. She ended up renting a beautiful space at Depot Storage, a company run by her brother, in a 19th century cranberry sifting warehouse in North Harwich. Her apartment studio occupied most of the third floor clear story of the building, with glorious space and light. Prior to moving there, she had attended a cooking class in Florence, Italy, where she discovered Passementeria Toscana, opening her eyes to the possibilities of using tapestry fabrics in her textile art. She had been hand painting silk up to that point. The ties in this slide are made from her silk, and the handbags made of tapestry fabric sourced at a jobber in New York City. And at this time, she founded her company, Common Thread. These are painted sneakers from about 1999, and this is how I met Naomi. When I was director at Cape Cod Museum of Art, we sponsored a number of artist open mic potluck nights. Naomi walked into one in January of 2000 with 3 women artist friends with whom she met every month for lunch and art making. Each would propose and provide materials for an art project to collectively work on. The painted sneakers idea was hers, and that's what they presented that evening. I was curating a series of Cape Focus exhibitions and wanted to mix more fine craft and invited her to exhibit. She eventually decided that instead of an exhibit, she would rather teach kids at the museum, as she had done at the Seattle Art Museum several years before. She also regularly attended our foreign film screenings. I had been on my own for about a year, and the more I saw of her, talked with her, well, you know. Her apartment and studio was an incredible space for creating, loaded with natural light in the daytime and a quiet rural atmosphere at night. Paul Schulenberg, another artist who used the other section of the Depot clear story as his studio, proposed the idea to Naomi that they use their studio spaces to host open life drawing sessions for artists during the off season. Every other Tuesday, they'd hire a model, and a dozen or so artists would show up to draw for about an hour and a half, then a bit of potluck gathering afterwards. This launched her back into painting. And as you can imagine, figures were her main subject. As you can see from this example, Dreamweaver, from the collection of the Cape Cod Museum of Art, though having a definite stained glass quality and design, she began using her carandash to create the layering effect that would occupy her work from that point on. This is Untitled from 2001. Here's another example where abstraction takes over, though you can make out an angel figure in the center right side. Her use of carandash color reveal method is in full force here. This is in the collection of UMass Amherst New Africa House. This is the tools that she used for her color reveal method, which is the carandash, which are water-soluble pigment crayons, and aquarelle, water-soluble pencils, makeup swabs, nylon wedge brushes, the tools of her color reveal method. She was exhibiting in non-traditional spaces at this point. After cutting the ribbon on the final construction for Cape Cod Museum of Art in July of 2001, I left the museum to work for another arts nonprofit by September of 2001. We were married on Monhegan Island at Burnt Head in Maine in October of 2001. We put off our honeymoon until October of 2002, a trip back to Italy for both of us. In Venice, a wonderfully enriching experience. On the return flight, I wrote a business plan for what would become Museo Gallery in Yarmouthport, Massachusetts, which opened in May of 2003. There we featured modern design glass housewares from Murano, Finland, Sweden, as well as classic mid-century glass pieces that I found at various antique malls in New England. The gallery also featured Naomi's textile work, her jewelry crafted with glass beads from our new friends in Murano, and her paintings. This is entitled Heartbreak. In July of 2004, Naomi was diagnosed with breast cancer. After considering the effects of 2 rounds of chemotherapy at Dana-Farber and radical mastectomy, we decided to close the gallery, and I would find a job that had group health insurance that would cover a pre-existing condition. I did, with an environmental engineering firm in Cincinnati. And in March 2005, we moved into a huge apartment loft space in the former Shillito department store downtown. Naomi said to me once as we were taking an evening stroll that the way she had reconciled her surgery was that now her heart was closer to the surface. It could feel more, it could give more. This painting illustrates that self-discovery on no uncertain terms. Her body parts lying on the cutting room floor, as she called it, removed a barrier. Her heart has broken free of that which hid it. This piece is painted with acrylics on paper. Sita is an all acrylic example shown in the exhibition. On an earlier evening walk, we met Henry, a huge Percheron with a carriage attached to him, looking very out of place as he stood there across from Fountain Square in downtown Cincinnati. They bonded immediately, and we encountered him many times in our walks. Cleo of 2005 was Naomi's first horse painting after meeting Henry. With my new job, I traveled throughout Wisconsin, Ohio, Indiana, Western Pennsylvania, and when I'd return, I'd find these incredible little horse paintings on her work table. My museum gallery mindset kicked in, of course, and I was able to talk her into having them framed for a showing in our huge loft living space, April 30th and May 1st of 2006. I also encouraged her to consider making very limited edition giclée prints of some of the first paintings. More on that in a minute. This is Henry and the Kavali, also in 2005. Though the image of Henry was made first in this triptych, Naomi began writing a story entitled Henry and Emma in 2005. The opening is autobiographical, but then proceeds to a reimagining of Henry's life, first as being from the West, transported east to New England with the addition of 2 friends. This, in my view, is a reconnection with her grandparents from Greenville, Maine, near Moosehead Lake, whom she visited many times as a child and spoke of often. Her grandfather managed the horse teams for the logging industry up there. Emma was her grandmother's name and one that Naomi would take as her middle name. This quote is taken from her story's initial pages. You may know that horses were native to the Americas, but actually became extinct during the Ice Age and were later reintroduced by the Spanish in the 16th century. This is Anima Mundi, spirit of the world. At first, she began with what I call her portrait focus on the horse-human aspect of her thinking. And then they developed toward more complex groups of horses, still each with personality. Come on. This is Sage Riders, done in 2006. And then she veered more toward complex detail. This is Pas de Deux, painted in 2007. She was very interested in the plight of the wild Mustangs out west. She made 3 paintings, the series Wild Horses, of which this is one, where the horses appear out of a mist and directly confront the viewer as if to ask, do we know you? And this is Sundancer. The original became one of the first limited edition giclée prints that she made, and a copy is owned by Behringer-Crawford. She sold quite a few of her original artworks at the Shiloh loft sale and vowed never to sell another original. So she found the Bell brothers, Howard and Steve, in Sharonville, Ohio, who, as retired paint color experts, opened a business photographing and making giclée prints from originals for artists. They were an amazing team and were so conscious of artists' needs in the reproduction process. She ended up reproducing about 12 of her paintings as limited edition giclée prints. In 2006 and 2007, we made several trips to the Kentucky Horse Park for inspiration and just to be around so many different horses. Soon after, the park began to sell her framed prints in their museum shop. She also sold her prints as well as her new jewelry creations at Fifth Street Gallery, City Cellars, Malden Gallery in Cincinnati, and Cafe Europa in Covington. This is Cowscape, and it's owned by the Cahoon Museum of American Art on Cape Cod. Horses were not her total focus, sometimes painting rural scenes, loving the geometry of barns, and amid the difficulties, injecting a bit of her sense of humor. And this is Surf's Up. Though I found this digital image to create the note card for it, the painting no longer exists in this form. One day, as I was probing her sewn piece entitled Henry's Blanket, I discovered this painting sewn into the overall construction. She used Henry's blanket, as well as the sewn bowl that's in the exhibit, to use up paintings she didn't feel warranted presentation in their original form. I would have disagreed with her on this one. This is Henry's Blanket and the Untitled Abstract that we saw earlier. In memory of Naomi and in honor of her teacher, I donated these to UMass Amherst New Africa House. This is Amilcar Shabazz and her teacher, Josephus Femi Richards, with me at the Dubois Library at UMass Amherst New Africa House in January of 2017. In 2009, I asked Naomi to create an image of the dragonfly for my album cover of the same name, featuring a song of that title. There are 2 songs on this album that I wrote as anniversary gifts to Naomi, Dragonfly and Walk in Beauty. And the lyrics to Dragonfly surround the image that she drew. This is Venetian Family on the left and Dreamer, both of 2009. Shortly after she made the dragonfly image, these little gems started to appear. Again, her spirit and a bit of her sense of humor and stories that surround the images. This is Sheath of Pain. Sometimes the frustration grew so intense. Again, you see the heart on the surface. Naomi's cancer returned after a 3-year remission in 2008. By 2010, we decided to move back to New England so that she could continue treatments at Dana-Farber in Boston. We settled in Sandwich, Massachusetts, again on Cape Cod, and before long opened our second gallery there, River Street Studio. We featured her artwork along with some Cape artists and a couple of artists that we met in Cincinnati, including Kay Hurley and Ober Ray Star Livingston. This is entitled Fall Migration, painted in 2012, and it's one of her last paintings. It's vivid but waning color, and each horse is named on the painting. Naomi ran the gallery while I continued to work for Apex via their New Bedford office. These are some of her necklace and earring sets made around 2011. When in Cincinnati, Naomi began to make jewelry again and would sell it at pop-up displays at Fifth Street Gallery. She continued to make new pieces and sold them at River Street Studio. She would name each necklace set. Here is Thai Princess on the left and Temple Goddess on the right. This is the brackish brook, which was next to our home and gallery in Sandwich 2012. Though she continued to paint and draw, she added photography to her creative pursuits. This is Cosmos, also painted in 2012. Our longtime friend John Carter had recently been diagnosed with prostate cancer and often joked with Naomi about their impending tour of the universe, a phrase that Naomi loved. This is a small piece reminiscent of the construction of her artist books. This is Naomi with Bergen at Ironstone Farm in Andover, Massachusetts in August of 2011. They had a special program for cancer survivors to spend a day with the farm's Heflingers. She would talk with me about this experience afterwards, almost every day. There's much more of her art that you won't see in this exhibit or presentation, but you can see and learn more at the website that I maintain to keep her work in the public eye. Now I'm going to move on to a presentation related to my exhibition, Abracadabra. What is Abracadabra? We're familiar with its stage magic associations, but it first appeared about 2,000 years ago in the writings of Roman physician Silenus Simonicus as a curative spell, repeated, leaving off the last letter until A is the last sound, when the curative nature of the word kicked in. It appears again in medieval manuscripts, also as a curative spell. It's used here as if it was torn from a spell book and tapers into an embroidered basket, which tapers into a fire at the center of a quaternio. More on the quaternio form later. In my youth, if I couldn't explore, I was bored. The woods and eccentric Mr. Coon's grassy fields around my house, instruction sites and their eruption of fossils, the skies with my telescope, the unseen with my microscope, the world with my stamp and postcard collections, the secrets of stage magicians' tricks, mechanical things with my dad's childhood erector set, sound with my crystal radio, phonograph, guitar, the Smoky Mountains with my grandparents, on and on. To me, the classroom was nearly unbearable. In my teenage years, the bus was my ticket to the bookstores, music stores, and the A.E. Wiley jewelry supply store in downtown Cincinnati. When I got to college, my first class was entitled Exploration of Thought with art professor Ronald Decker at Thomas More College. Decker not only explored forms of art, but forms of thinking, especially those that had begun to resurface during the so-called Age of Aquarius, art forms of what is termed popular spiritualism that I'll talk about in a few minutes. Though I was there to study theater and loved that too, especially the history of theater and playwriting with Ron Mellish, I began to veer away from that toward archaeology and art history. This led me to Professor Alphonse Lingel at Northern Kentucky State University, now NKU, and then to the University of Cincinnati for graduate work. Making art through these years was an exploration of materials that I would use at a later time to go headlong into concentrated art making. This statement is in the back of my mind as I think about and make art objects. And I'm right-handed, by the way. The perspectives that I try to bring into my images are reflective of my youthful explorations, many discussions with Naomi, as well as my studies of other artists' work, such as Red Grooms, the Starn Brothers, Joseph Cornell, Kurt Schwitters, Francesco Clemente, Antonio Tapias, Remedios Varro, Leonora Carrington, Helen Frankenthaler, and other historical forms of cultural expression, classical mosaics and shapes, classical icons, medieval and Persian manuscripts, playing cards, Tibetan mandalas and mandolas, and Japanese calligraphy. Ultimately, it's about the magic of art in all its forms. Nothing gets in the way of your vision of yourself in the future. I made this in 2012, and it's inspired by a fortune cookie fortune. Though I started making art again in 1999 and 2000, I focused primarily on our gallery from 2003 to 2005 and my music from 2007 on. As a museum director and always focused on supporting other artists in their efforts to be seen, I continued that mindset with Naomi. I started making art again when we had our second gallery in Sandwich from 2011 to 2013. Her gift to me was getting me back to my music. So I focused on that so I could start performing live again around Cincinnati while she focused on her visual art. I continued performing when back in New England as well. This is entitled The History of Love and Art that I made in 2013. After Naomi passed away, I took materials that were out on her work table and some that were on mine, and I mixed them in this collage assemblage in a shadow box frame. The photoacetate of Georgia O'Keeffe from her table reminded me of the Mike and Doug Starn exhibit at Cincinnati Contemporary Art Center in the late 1980s. Huge, beautiful photo transfer images on long flowing streams of acetate. So I bought overhead projector acetates made for reproducing photographs and, taking a cue from Naomi's idea of layering, began to explore the possibilities of layering acetates with hard copy photo prints and cut paper. Except in this instance of this piece, the photographs that I use in my work are my own. Though I may digitally modify a photograph, I don't make digital collages. This is another piece from 2013 entitled Come Back to Me in My Dreams. And the title of this is taken from the great Bill Monroe's song of the same title. And it's layered acetates and cut paper. This is another piece in the same vein. It's entitled Well-Being Natural Light from 2016, with the word Caduceus written on a found piece of paper. Caduceus is a Western classical symbol of healing. It's in the staff of Asclepius. This is a fun one. This is entitled Seance, 9:20 a.m. and 11:40 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And it's purely photoacetates that are layered. This was made to respond to an invitation to an exhibition at the Union of Maine Visual Artists focusing on chairs. It was inspired by an early 20th century photo of a seance showing a floating chair, which, because of the hidden camera, showed that it was floating across a suspended wire that couldn't be seen in the low light of the seance room. Harry Houdini spent a good part of his life using his skills as a magician to determine the veracity of the claims by spiritualists of the early 20th century and their ploy of preying on those whom had lost loved ones to war and disease through seances and spirit photography. His book, A Magician Among the Spirits, published in 1926, details how each spiritualist pulled off their tricks and made good money at it. Though most of my artworks in this vein take a more objective view of spiritualism in its many forms, this one is my lighthearted comment on these tricks. Only I show you how it's done. This is entitled Unconformity Conternio, done in 2022, just a few months ago. Though I'm using this term metaphorically, an unconformity is a geological term indicating an interruption in the natural stratigraphy due to a cataclysmic geological event. Another example of layered photoacetates, photographic print, thread, in one of my more recent Quaternio artworks. Again, I'll explain in a few minutes. This is entitled Introspection Fetish, made in 2015. It's a found object, torn paper, Japanese ikat fabric, India ink on vellum, gold pigment on acrylic on canvas. In 2015, I moved into a much larger apartment studio space in New Bedford, Massachusetts, and I began to work on a larger scale. This one is 30 inches by 40 inches and a broader range of materials. I love the bear as a symbol of reflection, introspection. Formally, you might see how my bear reflects the First Nation American concept of the spirit-filled fetish. It stares up at the sky to see what we know of as the constellation Orion, but what Native Americans knew as the Winterbringer. I'm also interested in going back to pre-mythology, a time when humans understood themselves to be of nature and not separate from it, how they acted within their life environment with an innate understanding of the liveliness of all things. This is What Motivates, made in 2015 as well. And as I began to work in this larger scale, I started to move to a richer painted surface and a broader range of applied materials. This wall in the BCM exhibit illustrates my interest in Western classical forms, diamonds and octagon shapes that would frame an ancient portrait of a family member or patrons, drawn from my studies of classical mosaics. This is Prayer, the Total Lover, made in 2016. The left arm of this finger puppet is removed and sewn to the heart. It's not a violent or bloody removal. This isn't a comment on sacrifice, but is based on the idea that the right arm represents the creative and the left arm represents nurturing. So the left arm, now direct from the heart, drops a pearl on a gold chain into the back of a bird that will carry it out to the world without prejudice. This is Et in Arcadia Ego, painted in 2015, and In Arcadia I Am. This piece was created specifically to answer a request for an artwork in an exhibition organized by friends in Venice, Italy, in October of 2015. Those with familiarity with Renaissance art may get the allusion to its painted compositional form. In this case, it's a combination of mixed materials, oil paint, gold leaf, cut paper, photoacetates, stained wood, and a gorgeous ornate frame. The theme for the exhibit was Liberamente, freedom of thought. I'm interested in the evolution of human thinking from pre-mythology to natural philosophy to science. What is an icon? From my own classical archaeological studies and art historical studies in Carthage, Tunisia, and Siena, Italy, and a lucky visit to the Museum of the Icon in Clinton, Massachusetts a few years ago, I was reminded of a whole realm of compositional forms for my use. The first icon was said to have been painted by St. Luke, a physician and artist, when he painted a portrait of Jesus' mother, Mary. From then on, it had a variety of forms based on cultural preferences, but were always beautifully ornate storytelling images to inspire meditation. Many were destroyed during the iconoclasm about 1400 years ago. And here on the right is an early icon that involves the crisscross form that I use. In icons and illuminated manuscripts, the crisscross is typically used to divide parts of a story or parable. The form as I use it, a quaternio, is an evaluative graphic used by mathematicians and physicists. In the book of published correspondence between physicist Wolfgang Pauli and psychoanalyst Carl Jung, it is used to evaluate the concept of synchronicity. I then related this form to the practice of Etruscan augurs, the priests called upon to provide the Etruscan leaders with an oracular determination based upon dividing the sky into cardinal points and watching from which direction birds would fly into the priest's field of view. And it was also used by the Roman architect Vitruvius in determining the layout of Roman cities using the Cardo and Decumanus system. Other influential forms are the Mandola, which is the almond shape that typically surrounds Jesus, Mary, or a saint in early Christian icons and other votive art, and a mandala, a Tibetan circular form of meditative art. I use these forms in many of my artworks and reflects my earlier studies with Ronald Decker at Thomas More College. This one is Fable of the Primal Altar that I made in 2017. This is a storytelling piece, and I invite the viewer to derive their own story from it. It's 4 feet by 4 feet, wood supports with acrylic, gold pigment, applied papers, photoacetates, objects, dried preserved rose blossoms. The octagon hangs from a discarded Japanese scroll bar. This is entitled Mystic, Background, Problem, and Advice, painted in 2018. Background, Problem, Advice is a typical occult tarot lay of cards. In 2018, I began working again with the lush opportunities of oil paints. Here are 3 briscola cards from a deck originating in the area around Venice. With the russet oils, I mimic a proscenium stage. When do playing cards become oracular? Briscola is still a popular card game in Italy, as was and is tarocchi, the original 15th century trick-taking card game, from which occult tarot cards were derived in the late 18th century by 3 French spiritualists. These briscola cards, akin to aces, each have words. So for the young couple that own this piece, here is the literal reading of their oracular spread. The background, don't trust me if you have no guts. Problem, for 1 point, Martino lost his hood. Advice, if you lose, the worse for you. I'll explain the middle statement. Hundreds of years ago, the monk Martino in a Cello monastery in Tuscany was tasked with carving a welcoming statement in Latin on the door arch of the monastery. He added a period at the wrong spot in this statement, and it changed it to an unwelcoming statement. For his mistake, he lost his opportunity for advancement to abbot, symbolized by losing his hood. A bit of fun with this one, I admit. The words are common historical idioms, but the research that went into this and other works is fascinating and truly fun. Again, this is Ronald Decker's direct influence via his 2 books published in 2013 on the history of tarot playing cards. This was entitled Disorientation Quaternio from 2021. In the Latin translation of the words that I use on the piece, all the news, always horrible. Now we inject it. Treatment is needed. Stop it. Here I use classical Latin to reach back in history to reflect the idea that the news has always been bad. But the computer symbols on the clay discs reflect that the fact now is that we know about the bad news in the broadest worldwide sense instantaneously, and that's a problem. It is psychically overwhelming. The figure on the right is my drawing of an Etruscan mourner from the misnamed Tomb of the Augurs from Tarquinia, Italy, built about 2,500 years ago. This is Elder's Puzzle on the left and Philosopher's Game on the right, and it's from 2018, and both of these are owned by the Behringer-Crawford Museum. And it was interesting watching folks at the opening weekend either ignore, embrace, or be timid about their opportunity to interact with an artwork. There are over 17,000 possible iterations of each of these artworks that viewers can make. My assemblage of both pieces' elements is part deliberate coincidental, that's the boards, and part stream of consciousness, the amulets and the curios. The central form of the board is the quaternio. On Elder's Puzzle, the colors on the board represent the color symbolism of both Native American and Japanese cultures. Coincidentally, they align with the colors of the process of Middle Eastern Western alchemy. The words are attributes of these colors that both cultures assign to their view of the four elements: earth, water, fire, and wind. It's interesting that the Western element air is replaced with the more physically perceptible and effective wind. With Philosopher's Game in particular, it attempts to play the dual role of breaking down the perceived barrier between artwork and viewer while engaging in a banter on the Eurocentric nature of Western philosophy and its inherent anthropocentrism. The words are the four Greek elements, the four medieval humors, and Carl Jung's four functions of the mind. Add your own choice of amulets or curios to the board and take a selfie. This is Astrologer's Votive, and it's also owned by the Behringer-Crawford. A friend gave me this folk carved toy, so I painted earth on the ballast ball and just had some fun. If you bat the ballast, the bear plays the drum and the rabbit dances. The cosmos is activated at your behest. Inside is another fortune cookie fortune that reads, you use your creative talents to transform a business environment. And now, La Scatola Fantasma, or the ghost box. This is going to be a little moment transition here. Come on. There we go. Thanks to the museum for making this little video of the ghost box in operation. There we go. There we go. As you can see in a second, this is a wooden box. In fact, it's a World War I shell case box. I've turned it on its side to create this little theater that uses a technique developed in 1861 called Pepper's Ghost Effect. It was invented to allow spirits to appear during appropriate plays in theaters at the time. We open the stage door, turn on the stage lights, and then the fourth light plug is removed and voila, a little ghost appears. In 1989, for Halloween, I wrote and directed several skits at Behringer-Crawford Museum, performed on the veranda with the help of the Villa Players at Thomas More College, illuminating historical ghosts of Northern Kentucky using this technique. This is inspired by and dedicated to Dick Nelson, a Covington attorney, stage magician, and family friend who taught me when I was 10 years old to perform professional stage magic tricks. Okay, this piece is entitled Grotto from 2021. I'm still exploring the use of various materials to explore the evolution of human thinking. In this case, using the Sufi concept to rejoin the immensity, written on the left side. A grotto is a sea cave, and the central image is the photograph that I took of a tidal pool at Monhegan Island, filling as the tide came in. It resembled a heart to me, which made me think of the dervishes as they twirl, getting to a state of trance where they envision themselves revolving around their floating hearts. Such a beautiful vision. I have an upcoming exhibition in Portland, Maine at the Mechanics Hall, where I'll display another array of artworks, 3 series, forwards, which are 7 illustrations for my 7-verse poem, Raven's Retort. Afterwards are 13 cards for my shard suit of cards for my Broken Vessel Cartomancy series that include a reflective question inspired by the composition for each card, and editorials, which are sculptural and reflect my observations of contemporary society. This is entitled Beguiled and Divested, Pilgrim's Progress, made in 2019. This is entitled Bardo, made in 2016. This artwork and one other are currently traveling to small art centers around Rome, Italy. I was just informed that they are currently at Tolfa at their Pinacoteca d'Arte. Bardo is a personal reflection on this Tibetan Buddhist concept. The common thread in most of my work is an archaeological layering and a historical exploration of the importance that we ascribe to the spiritual, revealing as I see it that these practices have power in society regardless of the realities behind their invention and use. And inspired by Naomi's artist books and their layered mix of paint, thread, image, and object, I have no fear when making decisions about the kinds of materials and methods to use. Most of all, I subscribe to the idea that art can be a portal for reflection. I'm always asking questions and enjoying the multiple perspectives that I encounter, but not worrying so much about answers. We all have our own, and many of us are evaluating what answers we have to see if they're still valid. I try to offer some reference points with my work. Both of us wish to inspire you with our images, to find a story of your own making and make it. I don't have a website. I prefer to find ways for folks to have an in-person view of my work. I feel that photographs don't capture the detail and dimensionality of it. But also, if you're interested in the books that I've used in my research, there is a bibliography in the notebook that's in the gallery, and I'm glad to email you a copy. And there's a bibliography for Naomi's work as well. You're welcome to send me ideas, thoughts, and questions via my email. Thank you so much. And thanks to Behringer-Crawford Museum and Mary Jane and Heather for help with this program. And also a special thanks to the folks that lent their paintings by Naomi for her exhibition. I think we have time for some question and answers, I hope.
Yeah, we do have about 10 minutes for questions and answers. But first, I don't think we had any answers or correct answers to the trivia question. So that question was, where did Naomi meet Henry? And I don't know if for the next couple minutes, if people want to still try to answer that, put it in really quick. And at the end, we can end up giving the answer. So that question is, where did Naomi meet Henry? We did have one question in the chat already, which I don't know if you want to give this away or not, but it was about the spirit box, and it was, how does it work?
Sure. It's a great little technique. In fact, if you go to Disney World, they still use the technique in the, I think it's called the Haunted Mansion, in the dining room dance scene. That is the Pepper's Ghost effect, and it's done with an angled piece of glass. So basically, when you angle the glass, and the little ballerina in my box is over on the right side behind the part where the door doesn't open all the way. And so when you lift that fourth light plug out, it casts light on the ballerina, and that light of her is reflected or cast behind the angled piece of glass. And so the little ghost appears on the stage. That's how it's done. So when we did it at Behringer-Crawford, we had a huge piece of plexiglass on the stage to do that.
It's pretty cool. I did actually see that in the Haunted Mansion exhibit as well.
They used it in Harry Potter as well. It's just a simple analog technique that is still used successfully, even in, high-tech filmmaking these days.
We did have a correct answer to the trivia question while you were explaining that.
All right.
It was Patricia Heasley, downtown Cincinnati. So congratulations on your answer. It was specifically Fountain Square, but in downtown. So congratulations. If you can DM the Behringer-Crawford account your mailing address, we can get you your prize. And if anybody else has any more questions, please type them in. We still have a few minutes to answer them.
Well, the exhibit is open till Sunday, the 24th of April. And then I'll be coming down. I'll probably spend some time in the galleries down there on the last day of the exhibition before it all comes down that following week. So make it on over there. There's some great bookmarks also that I had made. Carolyn Greenstreet is on this call. She's the one that designed them for me. And you're welcome to take those. Everybody can use a bookmark. And there's an image of Naomi's on one side, an image of mine on the other. So and there's a comment book too, which I look forward to reading. It's in Naomi's gallery down there. And I'm looking forward to taking a look at those comments in a few weeks.
So we have a question here. Are you still performing music? And if so, where?
I stopped performing when the pandemic hit. And the reason was not the pandemic, other than the fact that all the music venues shut down. But also I have an issue with my left arm that's just gotten worse. And so I can't sustain a performance anymore. I can still play the guitar, but I can't sustain a performance anymore. So I've had to give it up.
And is there anything that you have never done that you really want to do, like a certain series?
Good question. I want to do more with sculpture. With my editorial series, I started making full round sculptures, and they're assemblages. But I'd like to do more of that, but I would need a larger studio space in order to do that. And I have a very small space here in Portland. So that's something that I always have in the back of my mind. And, so that's something I'd really like to do, to expand upon that idea.
We still have a few more minutes for questions. People want to get some in.
Kirsten and Paul.
In the meantime, if you would like to answer maybe what was like the most challenging part of your research, or maybe the most interesting thing that you have come across in your research.
Well, first of all, what's most interesting is that my first teacher at Thomas More College, he is a thread through my life, just through the books and the research that he's published. And it fascinates me. I love the design of playing cards, and some of the beautiful tarot decks that have been developed, designed over the past century are just so amazing to me. And whether you use them, as in their occult form or just in a playing card form, they're just beautiful works of art. And so I love that. And I love the fact that, Ron, who actually, after he left Thomas More College, he became the curator of the U.S. Playing Card Company Antiques Card Collection, and he really developed their Taroki playing card segment of that collection. So he's had a great deal of research material to work with, and I've benefited from it, by buying his books and, keeping up with what he's doing and involving some of those ideas in my work. Challenging is always, I think, some people might say my work is a bit too cerebral, and, so how does it become less so and more so universal? And that's where I try to use my forms that are familiar to people, like icons and things of that nature, to kind of draw people in, but use the form to express something different. And so it's always a process of thinking things through and using forms, creating your own forms, mixing and matching. And I love using a variety of found objects. A lot of my postcard collection, a lot of my stamp collection are all in those artworks. So the stamp collection from when I was 10 years old, and it's in many of those artworks. So it's just fun, keeping your mind open so that you're not closed as to how something should be. That's a challenge.
We have a question from Facebook Live. What is your favorite piece other than your own on display at BCM?
There are, aside from Naomi's and my work, the really wonderful thing that happened with the opening of our exhibits is that they opened with a much larger exhibition of Harlan Hubbard's artwork.
Yeah.
And I can't pick a single artwork in there that I like better than another. I just absolutely love Harlan's work. I loved Harlan and Anna. They were good people that I knew many years ago when I was director of the museum. And so that to me is very special, to have all that work right there in the next galleries with Naomi's and mine.
Yeah, we also have a question. With your love of tarot cards and other iconography in your work, do you believe in the supernatural?
Well, I would say this: I don't know. And I think that's just how it is. We don't know. We know that certain techniques have been developed by very clever people to help us think that there is. But I myself do not feel that there's any way to really answer that question with any certainty. I don't know.
It's a very hard thing to tell. It's just pretty much probably just a personal belief, and I guess we'll find out eventually.
True. Yes, I know. That's the tough part, is the day you find out, you don't want that day to happen too soon, you know?
So we're gonna go ahead and close out. It is about time to end. So thank you all for joining us tonight. I would like to highlight our special exhibits at Behringer-Crawford Museum, Spirit Riders and Abracadabra, as well as the Harlan, Hubbard, and Houdini history exhibits. They're all on exhibit now through April 24th. There are still some seats open for our 2 summer camps, as well as our upcoming Earth Day themed Chippy's Kids Club event. And you can find more information for all of those things on our website, bcmuseum.org. That is all we have time for this evening. So thank you again to all of our sponsors and the supporters of BCM. We'd also like to thank the staff, trustees, and members of the Behringer-Crawford Museum. For more Northern Kentucky history throughout the week, you can check out our Facebook page as well as our YouTube channel, where you can find the latest installment of our Curators Chat with our Curator of Collections, Jason French, as well as eventually this History Hour and all the previous History Hours. Please like and subscribe to those videos if you haven't already. There will not be a Northern Kentucky History Hour next week as we continue our bi-weekly schedule, but we will be back on April 6th with UC PhD student Emily Simpson on fossil hunting, geology, and other fascinating finds in the Behringer journals. Until then, take care, everyone, and good night. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thanks very much. Bye, everybody. Thank you.